Welcome back to Farming on Purpose. Today, I'm sharing with you an interview that I did on Off-Farm Income, a podcast by Matt Brechwald. And you may remember Matt from an episode he did on the Farming on Purpose podcast a few weeks ago. And today, I'm just really excited to share this interview with you from that podcast. Go check out his podcast, Off-Farm Income. He's been podcasting for a long time and has some really great content. So please go check his out and enjoy this episode today as a feature of his podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Off-Farm Income Podcast. This is your host, Matt Brechwald, and today is one of our ag business episodes. Well, today's interview was an absolute blast for me. Now, let me explain. I've been interviewing agricultural entrepreneurs on this show since 2014, so we are dangerously close to a decade of me doing this. And I try to interview agricultural entrepreneurs from every different aspect of the spectrum so that you in this audience can finally click and connect with what it is that's going to work for you so you have the best chance possible of being successful with an agricultural entrepreneurial enterprise. With that said, that means I interview a lot of people who have the aptitude, the desire, the passion, the skill set to pursue a form of small business and ag that I don't. And so I'm always interested to speak with them, always very interested to glean the best information from them possible to share with all of you, but it's not always something that I would naturally fit into. But occasionally I get somebody on the blower who I have a ton of intersection with as an entrepreneur. Today is one of those interviews. Today I am featuring Miss Lexi Wright. She is the owner of Wright at the Moment. This is an agricultural marketing firm that she operates out of Kansas, off of she and her husband's farm there in Kansas. And she's also the host of the Farming on Purpose podcast, which I have listened to and previewed prior to having her on the show, and I highly recommend. This is a great interview. She has got a lot of great insight to offer you in terms of trying to develop your agricultural, your rural, your farming, your ranching lifestyle. In addition, in this interview, she drops a couple gold nuggets that I'm very, very excited for you to hear. I will give you a hint. I shouldn't say where it's at in the interview because I want you to listen to the whole thing, but this is towards the end of the interview. She talks about turning the tables on social media and really using it to your benefit. And that came right towards the end, and it put the biggest smile on my face because A, I love the turning of the tables, but B, what a great idea. There's a ton like that in this interview. Very excited to present it to you, and we're going to get it started for you right now. Lexi, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, you bet. It is great to meet you. And I have checked out your work and your content. I very much like what I found, and I'm eager to share you with my audience. So I think we should just jump right in. I'm just getting to know you. And so why don't we just do that while we're recording the episode? Tell me about you and your family and all of that.
Yeah. Well, my name's Lexi Wright. We're located in Kansas. We kind of jumped from being beginning farmers, doing our own thing for the past 7-8 years to 6th generation farmers almost overnight when we purchased my husband's family farm and moved here just this year. I've got 4 kids, all under the age of 7. So we stay really busy with kids' activities and toddler sleep transitions and all of that stuff. And then I own a marketing business where I get to help rural and ag businesses reach the people that they want to reach for their business. So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay. All right. Obviously, we have to explain the transition. So beginning farmers to 6 generations. So where did you move to Kansas from, I guess? Where were you at originally?
We were just in a different section of Kansas. So It wasn't like a far move, but about 2 hours away. And
so, I mean, the impression I got from what you said was a small farm, with maybe some sort of a niche or something. What was that like there? What were you doing?
Well, so we had bought a property when we first got married. It was 20 acres.
Okay.
And we ran goats and meat chickens. And then we were trying to expand our small cattle herd. The biggest we were able to get there was about 30 head, and we were renting grass and trying to just figure out how do we get to the next level for us.
Okay.
The area we were in, ground was really expensive. It was at a price that we weren't going to be able to compete at. And we also weren't from the area. So we didn't really have those connections to get to the land, the person who was selling it before they put it on an auction. And then so we were actually married at my husband's grandma's farm and never dreamed that we would have ended up here. The transition plan for the farm had not been decided. It hadn't really been talked about at all until this past year. And we decided, we're having a lot of trouble expanding where we're at. This seems like a good opportunity. His grandma was 90 this past year and was ready to get out of the farm. So we were able to purchase that and move here. And we're so grateful for that opportunity.
Interesting.
That transition doesn't always go that smoothly.
No, it does not. I mean, it's a well discussed or extensively discussed, part of the agricultural journey. That could be its own podcast, not just its own episode. And it is its own podcast on some people are doing. So your first property, you and your husband's first property, when you say raising meat chickens, I automatically think small farm, niche, to increase profit margins and to be able to generate positive cash flow on a small piece of property. That's what it sounds like to me. But with the transition now to the 6th generation farm, did you transition from that small niche, maybe direct to consumer model to now a more production agriculture model, or how did that go?
Yeah, so we never dove into the direct to consumer side of things when we were there. We would do a little bit with the goats, but it was really just here and there. We were doing the meat birds primarily for ourselves and neighbors. Okay. So we would harvest, I think the most we ever did in a year was 50 birds because of the state regulations that we have here. You can't do more than that and then give them to anybody else. So that was mainly just to reduce our grocery bills and to try to figure out some things that we could try. When we transitioned here, we completely sold off the cow herd that we had before, because those cows were getting older. They weren't going to be a good fit for us when we moved here. So we sold those cows off and bought a whole new herd. Okay. Which was a big change. Yeah. And obviously we were able to run a lot more cows here than we were on 20 acres of dry lot and then the little bit of rented grass that we could find.
Oh, got it. Okay. So now primarily a beef operation.
We are primarily beef. And then we did, the property does have a little bit of crop ground. We've got 70 acres of tillable. Okay. Interesting. So that was a big transition too. We'd never been crop farmers before. Okay. Oh, really? So just livestock. And so how's that learning curve gone? And how long has it been now since you did this transition? We just moved in August. We bought officially in June and got moved over the summer. So it's very new still. Okay. We did plant corn before we officially bought the property. So we harvested that this fall. Okay. That was a big transition. We had to buy a lot of equipment that we'd never had to own before. With livestock, we had to buy a combine, we had to buy a planter. We were able to borrow a drill to get wheat planted behind the corn, thankfully, so we didn't have to buy a drill. But just that shift in the need for equipment, even for a small amount of crop ground, was a big change for us. And we knew it was coming when we bought the property, but it was still one of those things that you can plan for it all you want. When you actually go do it, it feels a little different to do that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Planning and implementation are never identical.
Yes.
Yeah, never. Now, I was very flattered to hear in our pre-interview that you discovered my podcast some years ago when you were an FFA member and you were looking for information or just, I don't know. Well, let's just go back. Tell us about your FFA journey and I guess running for state office and all of that type of stuff. When was that and how long were you in the FFA?
Yeah, so I joined FFA my first year of high school. against my mother's wishes, actually.
Oh, really?
My mom grew up on a farm and had, it was rough. They had really struggled as a family to make ends meet on a farm. And so she hated to see me discover that passion and worried about what my future might look like. So I joined FFA anyway, and I think she got over her hesitation very quickly once she saw how much I loved it and how much success that I found in the organization. I competed in a lot of different career development events, and I became chapter president and district president. And then I ran for state FFA office my sophomore year of college in Kansas. I ran for national office after that. I did not get national office, which was a godsend for me. I didn't know that at the time, but it definitely was. And yeah, I learned so much from the organization. I credit it for where I am today, 100%. My ag teacher is my hero, most amazing person I know. And yeah, I actually went on to teach high school ag my first year out of college because I didn't know where else to go after an organization that impacted me that positively. And it felt really good to try to give back just a little bit to something that gave so much to me.
Sure. Interesting. So your mom, being an entrepreneur, being somebody who transitioned from very secure government work to being self-employed, I don't know, 10, 11 years ago, whatever that was. I read a ton of stuff and listened to a ton of stuff trying to give me instructions, but also trying to give me encouragement and trying to find somebody who was in my corner saying, yes, this is a good idea, go do it. And it's interesting because one of the things that inspired me to start this show was looking out there on the world of social media interaction, and somebody would pose the question, how do I get started farming? And people would just come back and be like relentless, just like, don't do it. Don't do it. You can never make it. There's no hope. It's never going to work out. Don't do it. And I sat there and I was like, no, I realize it's difficult, and I realize that it takes passion, and we're willing to sacrifice a lot just to do this. And to our own detriment, sometimes we do this to ourselves, but no, don't have that negative attitude. So I've seen a lot of people say, don't go into farming. Your story is the first one where I've heard a parent who is trying to look out for their child, trying to do best by their child as they know how to, not just saying don't go into farming, but don't even go into the FFA. She equated you going to the FFA with you going into farming.
Yeah. And I think she probably knew from, watching me grow up my whole life that I already had that affinity for agriculture, and I was begging for it, at every turn as a child. But I also was able to do well in school. And so I think she wanted to push me more towards the sciences and the maths and see what I could do with that, post high school, post college. And that just wasn't the direction that I wanted to go. And I think she knew that very first year. She was like, oh gosh, if she gets into FFA, she's never coming back. So she could see the path I was headed down. And she was right, but it worked out.
Yeah, I bet it worked out. Now, there's something you've written here on your website that really caught my eye, and I wanted to bring attention to, and I wanted to talk about a little bit, in particular for high school and college students that are interested in ag education, all this type of stuff that may be listening to the show. So you wrote, I went to college with goals of farming and teaching agriculture, but instead I do both of those things just in a very different way than I imagined. Now, I wanted to talk about that for a second because I wish there was the bandwidth in the public education system to give students this perspective, but there just isn't. They're just too overworked. There's too much else going on, and so they've got to pick a direction, and they pick the direction of this very, very traditional pathways. And so, for a person like myself to break out of that and go and find some other way to make a living, support the household, do all of that, you got to break all these social constraints first to be able to do that. And I imagine that you've gone through the same thing just based on what you wrote here. But for somebody who wants to be an ag teacher or somebody who wants to teach about ag or just even on a more base level, somebody who is a teacher at heart, I would say that's me. I love to teach. At heart, I love to teach. And my passion is in agriculture. There is more than one pathway to get this done. It doesn't have to be in the classroom if that's not where you belong. I don't think I belong in a classroom, in a bureaucratic type of organization. I do not thrive in that type of organization, but I still consider myself to be teaching about ag, not in that very traditional sense. So when I saw that what you had written here, I went, well, there's a kindred spirit. There's somebody who has thought this through and come to the same conclusion or something like that. But tell me about that statement that you wrote on there. Hey, everybody. I just want to take a quick second away from our show to talk about our great sponsor, and that is Powder River Livestock Handling Equipment, the leader in livestock working equipment. Man, you should check out some of the incredible products they've got to help you work your cattle. The HC2000 hydraulic squeeze chute is just phenomenal, and the 2100 series tub and alley for getting your cattle where you need them to be. And by the way, have you ever looked at, held, climbed on a classic Powder River livestock panel? I mean, we use those to get our cattle into our Powder River squeeze chute here on our farm. And man, I have so much confidence. They are built so well. They are so stout. And the cows, even our bull, just does not even mess with those panels. If you've ever cheaped out like I have on a livestock panel and had your cattle get their head between those rails and just turn that thing into a taco shell right around them when they're trying to push out of a pen, well, then you will love the classic panel by Powder River. Go on over to powderriver.com, check out everything they've got to offer. Hey, you have it coming. You deserve to have a good working set of chutes, panels, sweep tubs, squeeze chutes, all of that to work your cattle to make that job easier and pleasurable in the way that it should be. And everything you need to make that happen can be found at powderriver.com.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the National FFA organization impacted my life in so many positive ways that I thought that teaching was the most natural next step. Mm-hmm. Even though I did not go to school for ag ed, I was able to do a transition to ag ed program that a college offered while I was teaching. So I was earning that certificate while I was already teaching in the classroom. But what I discovered through that was, teaching was not a good fit for me. I did not have the ability, much like you said, to thrive in that environment and to make the impact that I wanted to in that environment, and also be able to do the other things that I wanted in my life. The farming piece, I actually went to school for horticulture, fruit and vegetable production, which is not something that's common in Kansas. We're mostly commodity crop. And I had dreams of owning an orchard. And I worked at an orchard, one of the few that was in Kansas at that time, for a summer in college. And I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible. But I have no option to do this in real life. Like, this is not a realistic next step for me. So I started looking at what other options I had, and how to find the pieces of the things that I loved and fit them into my life in different ways. The teaching agriculture piece, I have always been really, opinionated about advocating for agriculture. I used to have a blog, and I used to do some public speaking about, why our agriculture matters and how we talk to consumers about it and that kind of thing. And I loved that, but I was like, I don't understand what's next here. How do I go forward and still do these things I love and still, make all the parts of my life make sense together. I didn't want to go into corporate ag. I didn't want to go and be just a full-time public speaker. I didn't want to be in the classroom every day for teaching ag. And I wish, like you said, that there were more opportunities for people to see the day-to-day of it and not just the, oh, well, you want to teach about agriculture, you must want to be a teacher. It's like there's other options to do that. And especially now that I've gotten into the world of entrepreneurship, I've realized that there are a million open doors to do those kinds of things. You kind of just have to create your own path. The path is not going to be necessarily one that has a staircase of steps that all make sense, one right after the other.
Man, I am viciously writing down bullet points as you're speaking, because so much I love it when somebody comes on the show that is a kindred spirit with me, because it reminds me of my journey and my pathway so much, and I want to touch on that. But before I jump into all of that, I want to make sure we do something really quick. So, as you know, from back in the day when you were actively involved in the FFA and you had those pursuits and you were listening to my show, you know that when I interview an FFA student, I always try and give a shout out to their FFA advisors. I am such a huge fan of ag teachers. I would not thrive in that environment. And that's a way of saying that I can't do what they do, but making it sound like a compliment to me. But truly,
right? Me too.
Truly, I can't do what they do. I mean, I'm on our advisory committee for our local FFA chapter, where my daughter is a member, and all 4 ag advisors are on the advisory committee with the rest of us. And these people put in the hours they put in, and the devotion they put in, and the level at which they've got this chapter running is phenomenal to me. And I know I could go become an ag teacher right now, as so could you. I've got an ag degree. I could easily become an ag advisor, ag teacher, FFA advisor on an emergency credential, and then finish up my credentialing, because they need FFA advisors. I've had that offer given to me before. When it was first given to me, it was when I was becoming an entrepreneur, and I was like, no, I want to work for myself. But now, a decade, 12 years later, I have gotten to know what FFA advisors do so well that I realize I would be a bad ag teacher. I would really be bad. I couldn't bring the energy like they do. It's unbelievable what they do. And thank goodness for those people who do belong in that classroom and in that environment that found their way to that location, because it's unbelievable what they do.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I was able to be an ag teacher and give it my all for the year that I did it, but it was not sustainable for me.
Right.
Because I was doing things outside of my strengths. I was trying to force this thing and try to be good at the things that I knew were needed. And it was not something I could do long term. The people who are ag teachers, oh my gosh, I hope that they know. I hope that every ag teacher, if they're listening to this, knows the impact that they have, not only on students when they are in the classroom, but for the rest of their lives. Like, I think about my ag teacher so often and how much of an impact she made on my life. I don't know where my life would have gone without her influence.
Well, you said another tidbit there that's so important, especially for any high school or college students who are listening to the episode, is you discovered once you got into that environment, it was outside your strengths, to quote you. It was outside of your strengths. And so you had the self-awareness to realize that, and then the courage to go, well, this is not the right fit, therefore I must move on. And I just want to give permission to any student who's listening, whether it be college or high school, any student who's listening, no matter what field they're planning on going into. Mine was not education. Mine was law enforcement. I went into law enforcement, and at first I couldn't believe they paid me to do it. 15 years later, I was like, I've been doing this too long. It's time for me to move on. I just want to give permission to anybody listening that you may go through the whole process, 4 years of undergraduate study in ag education, maybe a semester's worth or a year's or whatever it is of student teaching, maybe even a master's degree before you finally get into that classroom and it feels like the culmination of all this work. And then if you go, this isn't right, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing, for the good of yourself, but also for the good of those students, you need to accept that that's correct and realize that when you're 18, it's difficult to choose what the right fit is for you. for the rest of your working career. And if you get into it and you realize it's not right, it's time to look at, is there something I can do here to make it right? If not, how do I pivot and use what I've learned and the skills and the education I've got to steer me into the right fit? Because you're on the right pathway. You just may not have landed in the right job. Does that sound
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. And I think there's so much pressure on young people at that age to like find their thing that they're going to do for the rest of their life. And that's a lot of, just like you've said, the public education system kind of wants us to do that. They coach us to that decision. And it doesn't have to be that way. Mm-hmm. I think for me personally, the self-discovery process of figuring out and getting closer and closer to what I am really good at and what I feel good doing every day. It's every day I have to make those decisions and those discoveries. Mm-hmm. It doesn't just stop when you turn 18 and you choose your major in college or when you choose your career path. Mm-hmm. It continues for the rest of your life, or at least my life so far has been that way.
Yeah. And I just like being that voice. I like being a voice. There's the old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And so if there's a student out there who just has this nagging in the back of their head that, man, none of this feels right, and they go searching, then like myself or you, we will appear. We will, because they're going to find us, because they're just going to search until they find what they need. And we're there as somebody giving permission to go, no, you can look at this differently. Public education, you've got such great devoted people in all aspects of it. But look, if they fit in that environment and they stay in that environment, by definition, they're in the right fit. They're not entrepreneurial, outside the box thinkers. They're part of that system, which is fine. We need them in that system. But certainly they care about their students, and they didn't choose entrepreneurship or an abstract, outside the box kind of lifestyle. And so if that's not within their comfort zone and they care about the people they're giving advice to, then they're going to project those fears or those hesitations onto those students, which is going to sound like discouragement to those students if they're thinking about outside the box ideas. And so I just want to be a resource to those students, say, no, they just don't have the same life experience, but yes, there is another pathway. Now that's what I just absolutely fell in love with the FFA over, was you've got an SAE and there's 3 options. And one of those is entrepreneurship. One of those is, what can you do on your own outside the normal pathways? And I thought that is incredible. And then there are some ag advisors out there who I've interviewed 5, 10, 15 of their students over the last decade. And I don't even understand how they inspire these kids to start these outside the box businesses, but they do. And I'm just such a fan of that.
Absolutely. I think that it's also really powerful for those students who are trying to figure out where they fit to get as much opportunity to shadow people and to go see the day-to-day reality of the role or the job that they're looking at as much as they can, because I think sometimes we fall in love with an idea of what we think it's going to be. And then when we get there and we start living it every day, it's very different than what we maybe imagined. So those opportunities that FFA has for you to go job shadow people in your community are invaluable. Take every single one that you can get.
All right. Now, another place I feel like you and I overlap is as you're telling the story about wanting to work in the fruit industry and have an orchard in Kansas, what I hear is you're an outside the box thinker. For some reason, you're kind of countercultural, or you see things differently, or you want to do something that is outside the mainstream, and maybe a little bit of you wants to prove to other people, no, look, I can think for myself, and look what I was able to do. Is that true?
You see right through me. You see right through.
That's funny. Well, I'm very similar. That's why I can see that. But I definitely heard that when you said that. Okay. So, Lexi, we've got an extensive background on the way you think, the pathway you've taken, all of this, and that has all led you to your self-employment, to your business. And so I want to make sure I've got 3 terms in front of me. I want to make sure I get them right so people can find you. So the website is backpocketsocial.com. The business name,
Yes.
the business name is Wright at the moment, and the podcast is Farming on Purpose Podcast. Do I have everything correct here?
You bet.
Okay. Tell us about your marketing business and when you began.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I probably should have realized that was what I am supposed to be doing a lot sooner in life than I did, but I wasn't paying attention. I started helping organizations and businesses with marketing while I was still in college. I would work on little freelance projects for them to market events or create like promotional videos for conferences, things like that. Had a lot of fun doing it. Charged, very reasonable, low cost prices as a college student that I was like, ooh, an extra $100. Heck yeah. And then as I went and after I graduated and did my year of teaching, I just felt really lost after that. I was like, I know teaching's not it for me, but what is? What is the next step? And while I was kind of in between and deciding, I started getting more of those freelance projects, and they continued to be a part-time income for me for the next several years. I started working in communications roles for other businesses and marketing, and kind of just expanding my more traditional knowledge around that. I had a lot of picked up knowledge that I was, gaining just because I enjoyed it and I loved it. But then I learned more traditional knowledge in those roles for other companies. And then I branched out on my own about 5 years ago, full time with a freelance marketing agency, and started helping ag and rural businesses reach the people that they want to reach most. We focus a lot on social media marketing and advertising, email marketing and copywriting and website design. And then we do video projects when we get time. Those are the big ones that, you got to travel and stuff for that. So hard to do as a mom of 4 kids, but we have fun when we get to do them.
All right. Who's your target market? What's your, I guess the avatar of your customer?
Yeah. For me, it's anybody who has an ag or food business or lives in a rural community or has a business that serves rural communities and is passionate about making rural communities thrive. I think that the people who live in rural areas and are out there producing the food and the byproducts and the inputs that we need as a society to function have so little support and so little opportunity to find the things that they need on a daily basis. Usually it's one option. So businesses that deal with food and help those producers have additional ways to market their products or provide them services, those are the people I love to work with. They're the ones who make stronger communities out here. So they really overlap passions with me, and I love working with them.
Man, one of the things that inspired me to do this is going through small towns, small rural agricultural communities, and seeing boarded up windows and buildings on Main Street. And that is a trend that is depressing to me, and that if I had the power, I would completely reverse it. And I understand why it's happened. I understand why it's occurred. I also believe that it's a result of probably wrong priorities, ultimately, in a lot of ways. Or maybe just focusing on just one priority. Maybe I should put it that way, rather than looking at things more holistically. And so that's been one of my goals too, is young people who want to farm. And obviously you and your husband have lived this in 2 different ways now, but you're caught in this trap, which is, if I live somewhere where it's reasonable for me to get to a job that pays well, that can support what I want to do in agriculture and farming, then the land prices are so high because I'm competing with non-farmers for this land, all sorts of different stakeholders who want the same piece of ground that I want. But if I go out to where I'm only competing with other farmers for the ground, but I can't farm full time, I need that off-farm income, then all of a sudden the jobs aren't available because rural communities are shrinking and boarding up, and what jobs are available are low paying. And so I can't use my skills, I can't use my talents, and I can't make enough money to support what it is I'm trying to do. And so it's this catch-22, and I've always advocated for entrepreneurship as a way to bridge that gap. but it sounds to me, you've lived this in two different ways, it sounds like to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a big decision for us. Not only to choose to move to a more rural location where we would have the opportunity to be able to expand, but also for me to step away from full-time employment and become an entrepreneur. When we made that decision, all the doors started opening up for us, not only in my business, but just as we were farming, we started looking at things differently. When you start realizing that paycheck doesn't come every 2 weeks and it's up to you to figure out how to make ends meet. And if you want to make more money to pay for the inputs that you need or however you want to grow, it's just you. It's just you that you need to figure it out and learn how to do that. And that personal responsibility and accountability changed everything for us and how we approached farming.
Interesting. Now, you have mentioned or used the euphemism, I guess, of open doors a few times now in our discussion. Earlier, you talked about after you decided to make this leap, you saw 1 million open doors. Now, there's something I've said on this show many, many times, and I want to reinforce it and hopefully get your backup, but no pressure. You tell me what's true for you. But what I've said on the show 1 million times is I spent probably 2, maybe 3 years metaphorically banging my head against the wall, trying to figure out what my passion was, what identify that so I could start a business that would feed off of that passion so I could be successful. And I could not come up with any ideas. It became depressing to the point where I would not allow myself to imagine my life as an entrepreneur because I didn't think I was ever going to be able to achieve it. And so it just became this thing that would bring me down. And I tried and I tried and I tried, and I could never, ever come up with an idea until one day, just by happenstance, I stumbled across something that made me go, there's an idea. And then I kind of put that in my hip pocket. And then probably a year later, I saw a newspaper article that reinforced that idea. And I started thinking, that's it. Maybe that's what I should try. So I really came up with one idea that was viable, just one. I gave myself one chance. I spent the money to start the business, buy the equipment. And if it wasn't going to work out, I wasn't going to allow myself to do it again because I felt like as somebody that owned a home, had a wife and a daughter, that I couldn't just pursue what I was looking at as selfish interests to no end, to the detriment of my family. So I gave myself one shot. Now that business turned out to be profitable, and there's reasons why that worked out that have to do with my personality type, and we're going to run out of time, so I can't go into all of that right now. But here's what I noticed. When I did that, I saw one opportunity, one option. There was something weird that happened with the universe. Once I went out on my own, started my own business, and brought in that first dollar bill that was generated based off of my initiative and my idea, all of a sudden, it was like what you described as 1 million open doors. All of a sudden, where I couldn't see opportunity before, now I saw like endless opportunity. And I went from being frustrated with not being able to see them to now having to exercise self-restraint and not pursuing everything I saw. Did you experience anything similar to that?
I definitely have. For me, it wasn't necessarily tied to the income generation from my ideas. Although I love when I get clients amazing results and they are like, yay, good. This is exactly what we wanted. I'm like, that's awesome. That feels really good. But for me, I think it was, so I've had 4 kids while owning this business. And I put a lot of pressure on myself in the early years of my business to work like I thought I should be working. And to me, that was, you get up, you take your kids to daycare, you get them there by 7:30, you get home, you get on your computer, and don't you dare look up until you go get them from daycare.
Okay.
Because you are paying to send them there. So your job is to pay, to earn the money, to make it make sense. And I thought, I have to hustle so hard to make this work and to be an entrepreneur. And I reached my breaking point Probably when my third girl was a year and a half old and I was pregnant with my fourth, and I was so burnt out. I felt miserable. I wasn't getting clients, the results like I had been, because I was just like out of ideas and things were really hitting a wall. And all of a sudden I looked at my calendar one day and I was like, I don't even want to do anything that's on my calendar. Like everything looks awful. And so I just started taking stuff off. I just started taking it off and I was like, I'm not going to do this work right now if I can't be creative and do it the way that I know I do it well.
Okay.
And when I gave myself the freedom to work in a way that wasn't like a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 5 or whatever we want to call it, and to work on what made sense for me and how I function, that's when things changed for me. I started having more ideas. I started making immediate connections with people. My focus just totally shifted, and the doors that opened when I started thinking that way, that's when I started my podcast. That's when I started, being just lit up by everything I was working on again. And I think people see that in us, and it's that thing that clicks in you is what makes all of those things work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When I was, like I was telling you, when I was beginning this journey, I was listening to people, I was reading books on tape, podcasts, all of that. And part of it was for instruction, or at least that's what I thought it was for. But really what I needed permission to go down this road, and I needed inspiration, and I needed somebody to be my cheerleader, even if I never met them in person and stood in the same room with them. And I found those people out there that were like you, that enthusiasm, that passion that's coming through, and it helps to lift up the person who's just beginning that journey. So it's interesting that you found the path that way.
Yeah, I think the other thing with entrepreneurship is a lot of us don't have examples for it in our life. We don't know what that should look like. And so it feels really scary because it's like, there's not a template. You're not punching a clock. It's what do I do? And I thought that I had to do and figure all that out by myself. I was like, I'm not going to go hire a coach or watch a bunch of YouTube videos that tell me how to do this. I have to figure it out myself because I am self-sufficient. And I think a lot of farmers think that way too. You know, we're scared to ask questions and look for advice because we expect ourselves to know. And it doesn't have to be that way. As soon as I started looking for examples and learning from other people, things got way easier.
Yep. Yeah. And those coaches, a lot of them are out there for free. If you just tune into their podcast or watch their YouTube videos or whatever, until you can afford to go deeper and your business can pay for it, it's out there for free. And I got a lot. I mean, I've never been a frequenter of the public library, but during that aspect of my journey, I was a frequent frequenter of the public library because books are free at the library, and as long as you get them returned on time, and that was free coaching. There's great information out there, and at the very least, you can learn from mistakes other people have made and not repeat those. It's been great. Let's talk about your podcast. I definitely want to encourage people to listen to it before we wrap up this interview. And I was looking through your list of guests. I've listened to a couple episodes. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed your delivery style, by the way. And you've got some great guests on here that really have a lot of insight. And, like, for example, like Jana Earp, you could hear an interview with her on my show. But you can't hear the same interview because your perspective in interviewing her, a great mind, you're going to bring out things from Jana that I wasn't able to bring out in my interview. And so really, really valuable and great guests you've got on here. Looks like you began just about a little over a year ago, October of 2022. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. We just celebrated a year anniversary, and thank you so much for the kind words. That means a lot to me because this started as just something I did in my spare time, and I was just figuring it out as I went. So I definitely love the confidence boost that gives me from somebody like you who's done it forever.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, what I try to focus on in my podcast is finding the things that have made other people successful in agriculture and sharing them. And I think it requires approaching life differently. I think that a lot of us who didn't necessarily grow up on a farm or come to agriculture until later in life, we spend a lot of time trying to fit in and match the mold because, you know, there's a lot of pressure to do that in ag. You want to be in the in crowd. And then once you actually get into agriculture and look at the numbers and start figuring your operation out, you spend all your time trying to break the mold and trying to do things different so that you can survive. And that's what my podcast is all about, is finding those people who have done things just a little bit differently or adjusted their mindset to look at things differently. And they've found success in agriculture by doing that.
Very, very cool. What was the inspiration for you to start it?
It really was just a craving for community. You know, we're in a rural area. I work from home. I didn't get to talk to people about the things that I was thinking about all day long. And so I was like, you know, nobody wants to just have me call them up on the phone and chat about this stuff. You know, it's pretty hard if I called you and was like, hey, Matt, I want to talk about ag for an hour. You're like, I don't really got time for that. But if you start a podcast and you invite them to come on and talk with you so that other people can hear it and benefit from it, then they're a lot more willing to do so. So that's kind of where it all started. And I didn't know I would love it as much as I do. Getting to meet people and learn from them. It's really special.
Yes. That's very interesting to hear you say. And it's interesting too, if you're a farmer, if you're a rancher, by nature, you're going to have a strong community, but it's going to be sparse and spread apart because of the nature of where you have to live and what you do. You need that ground, thus the population density where you're at is smaller. And so it's more difficult to find community because of your rural situation. That's from the farmer perspective. From the entrepreneurship perspective, you could be in the middle of the city and have no community because very, very few people choose this path. And so the only way you can find a sounding board, the only way you can connect with people who think like you, by the way, why I enjoy a conversation with somebody like yourself so much is because I don't have anybody in my immediate circle who lives near me or that is among my lists of friends outside of my entrepreneurship, you know, like friends I've had for a lifetime or family or whatever. There's nobody in my circle who thinks this way. And as a matter of fact, there's so many people who project their own fear onto me that when I've got an idea, I don't even share it with them because I don't, any negativity I can get from somebody is going to be a detriment to my success. So I don't share that. And I advise that to all my listeners too. Don't share an idea till you've proved the concept. And then share it, you know, but don't do it beforehand because somebody who's not an entrepreneur, they're not going to be trying to be mean, but they're going to be fearful and project their fears onto you. And you're just different people. So for an entrepreneur, man, you could be right in the middle of the city and have no community. And this is a great way to manufacture that community, I guess.
Yeah. I had a guest on my podcast a couple weeks ago. The episode hasn't come out yet, but Camry, so she works a lot with young people in rodeo. And she gave listeners some advice that I'm taking very seriously about finding that community online. And that was that, you know, we're all on social media. It's not going anywhere. You know, it's part of our life. And instead of using it for entertainment, and just unwinding or disassociating or whatever you want to call it, train your algorithm to bring you that community and to bring you that education that you need to pave the way for your future. And since I started looking at social media like that, and that's just been a few weeks ago, oh man, I feel like I'm finding ideas left and right and I'm so inspired. And instead of like scrolling and maybe suffering from like the comparison game or, you know, oh, that person's annoying or just wasting time for entertainment. I'm feeling powered up and ready. And I think that's something a lot of young people could benefit from.
Man, I like that idea for a number of reasons. But my first knee-jerk gut reaction to you saying that is everybody talks about the algorithm and the way that they've written these things to manipulate us and control us, and but you're turning it around. You're manipulating the algorithm. I love that idea. That is really cool. And then, of course, I love the fact that you can get it. If you manipulate it, you can get it to bring you things that are beneficial to you rather than the negatives. So the logical next question is, how do you do that?
Yeah. So, okay, I'm a marketing person, so I'm going to dive into the technical pieces a little bit here.
Okay.
But first off, on, let's say Instagram is your app of choice, or TikTok. It's about the same for either one.
Okay.
Get off of your following page. Go to your For You page or your like discovery page, whatever you want to call it there.
Okay.
And start seeing what's suggested to you. If you feel good about the things suggested to you, awesome, amazing. You've probably already started down this path. If you don't feel good about those things and you're not seeing the things that you want to there, start searching for the topics that you're curious about, that when you do see them, you're like, oh, what's this? And when you start doing that, then you start to train the algorithm to bring those things to you. So like for me, an example, I had not spent any time training my Instagram algorithm, and I really didn't enjoy Instagram very much for a very long time. I thought that it felt very fake, and everything that I saw on there was like, this is my Amazon shopping haul. And I'm like, I don't care. This is not my life. But when I started doing this, and I started like, for me, I really enjoy horseback riding, and I haven't been able to do it since I've been a mom. I really want to get back to it. We have horses right outside, and I don't go ride them. But so I started searching for things like moms, like getting back to riding horses and things like that, and approach it like the questions that I have, the things that I'm like, I want to do that, but I can't figure out how to make it happen for me. Those are the things I'm searching for and interacting with and trying to find there. Okay.
All right. Now, I am of the same opinion. I'm on Instagram for business reasons. It's a weird deal because my daughter's on Instagram, and so I occasionally interact with my daughter, who still lives in the same house, by the way, on Instagram, which is very odd to me. I'm a codger. So just, to bring that term forward, I'm a 50-year-old codger here. I've always had an old soul, and I've always really liked the past. And now that I'm old, that makes me really a codger. So anyway, I jumped on my Instagram page while you were talking about that. And I want to go through this with step by step really quick, just to give everybody an example of what it is that you do and you're capable of here. So when I pulled up my page, I see off to the right, it says suggested for you. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that's a great place to start.
Okay.
The other thing you can do is there's a little arrow next to the word Instagram at the top.
I'm looking. I don't know if I see it.
It may only be on mobile.
Okay.
But you can choose following as an option there, or you can choose favorites. You can add accounts to that favorites tab that you want to see their content most. So when I do find an account that I'm like, oh, I love what they're putting out, I want to see more of this, I add them to that favorites tab.
Okay, so I pulled it up on my phone too, and I haven't found that arrow yet, but I'm positive that's because of my technological ineptitude.
No, it's okay. And everybody, there's hundreds of different versions of the app out on everybody's phones at one time or another. So it's totally normal. But yes, go into that magnifying glass thing. That's going to be a great place to start, or the recommended for you or suggested for you.
Okay.
Is perfect. And the biggest thing there is if you don't like what you see, that's how you know that you need to start doing some of that searching for the things that you do want to see. Because I thought for a long time it wasn't there. It's there. You're just not seeing it. You're not finding the people that you need to find. And another really good way is if you find a person that you love and you just connect with them, your kindred spirits, go see who's following them or who they're following, and go see what they're kind of feeding into their soul, because it's going to be really beneficial for you. Okay. Interesting. And then how long does it take for somebody to start seeing results and start to see the fact that they're manipulating the algorithm and they're getting the tools and the things that they want and need? Probably about a day. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. You should start to see things work into your algorithm right away.
Okay. Very interesting. Awesome, Lexi. Man, you've got a ton to offer. I'm so excited to have you out there. What else do people need to know about your business, about your podcast, about anything else before we wrap this up today?
The one other thing I would say is I do have a Facebook group. It's called Farming on Purpose, which is the name of my podcast.
Okay.
And what I'm trying to do there is just cultivate a community where people feel comfortable sharing and asking questions that maybe you don't necessarily feel comfortable asking your neighbors or the people around you. I think that there are so many people out there doing really smart things that are breaking the mold in agriculture. And we just have to find the courage to ask questions and be willing to share that with each other, because living in our own little bubble is not going to help us make this a more sustainable lifestyle. We have to figure out how to learn from others.
Awesome. Well said. And my only response is, very selfishly, I love my bubble.
You've spent time making a great bubble. So,
thank you, Lexi. Thank you so much for doing this today and for what you are doing. And I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us here today on the Off-Farm Income Podcast. We would love to connect with you. You can find us all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And hey, if that doesn't work for you, I would be just more than happy to get an email from you. You can email me at matt@offincome.com. And you can always call me on the telephone as well. The number is 888-597-5596. And everybody, as always, enjoy your journey to the ultimate lifestyle business, agriculture.